Use the most efficient method to solve x squared minus 3x minus 28 equals 0. We've learned a few different ways to solve quadratic equations, and the best method depends on which equation we're looking at. I want to quickly review the methods that we have covered and talk about when we should use each method. So the first method was factoring, and then using the zero factor property, where we set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And factoring is probably the easiest of the methods for solving quadratic equations, but unfortunately it doesn't work all the time because sometimes we have polynomials that can't be factored. So as far as factoring goes, we should always use it when the polynomial is easily factorable but if it's not, then we should consider one of the other methods. The second method that we covered was the square root property. Where we took the square root of both sides of the equation. And that is generally going to be the best method whenever we have something squared equals a number. And then if we don't have something that's easily factorable, or we don't have something that's in a nice form for the square root property, the last thing that we do is we use the quadratic formula. The nice thing about the quadratic formula is that it works in all situations, but the downside is that it usually requires a lot of calculations with square roots and a lot of arithmetic, which gives us a lot of areas to make mistakes. So we tend to want to avoid using the quadratic formula unless it's necessary, and the situations where it's necessary is usually when it's not easily factorable and it's not something squared equals a number. So quadratic formula is the method that we use if the other methods fail. Now, to be fair, there was a fourth method that we learned. We did learn the method of completing the square, but we don't generally use that when solving quadratic equations because the quadratic formula is a shorter way of achieving the same result. So really, there are only three options that I recommend using. Factoring, if we've got something that's easily factorable. The square root property, if the equation can be written as something squared equals a number. And if neither of those are the case, then at the end we default to the quadratic formula. Let's take a look at this quadratic equation, and we will be applying this same logic for all of the ones that we're going to solve. So let's look at x squared minus 3x minus 28 equals 0. Now, this is not in the form something squared equals a number, so we are not going to use the square root property. If we can factor this, we should use factoring, and if not, we should use the quadratic formula. Let's try to factor this. We should use the unfoiling method, and we're looking for two numbers that have a product of negative 28 and a sum of negative 3. And those numbers do exist. They are negative 7 and positive 4. So this becomes x minus 7 times x minus 4 equals 0. So factoring is the way to go, and now we can use the zero factor property to set each of these factors equal to 0. So x minus 7 equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0, and we can solve each of these equations for x. The first one gives us x equals 7, and in the second one, if we subtract 4 from both sides, we get x equals negative 4. So there are two solutions to this equation, x equals 7 or x equals negative 4, and that's our final answer.